Good afternoon. This is Daniel here with Cop Watch TV. Just want to welcome everyone into our live show. We're going to break down some of the most important and interesting issues and cases in policing. I want to thank everyone for coming back. So Shaquille Oatmeal, yeah, thank you. We haven't been here in a while, so let me just address that real quick. Typically, this is a show that we do every Friday. We typically do it around 12 o'clock Mountain Time. Now, the last few weeks, we've had a couple things go on. The first thing to go on is that I was out of town. So I was out of town for a wedding, and that actually encompassed 2 different Fridays. And then after that, I got COVID. It was the first time that I had it, but I was positive for about 10 days, so that encompassed another 2 Fridays. So just kind of worked out that way, where the last month or so we hadn't done the show. However, going forward, we definitely plan to be here unless something unexpected happens every single Friday. So definitely want to thank everyone for coming in today. And just a reminder, one of the things that we really like to do here on the show is, as we're going through some of these cases, if you have any questions or comments, please let us know and put it in the comments, because going back and forth is absolutely one of our most favorite things to do, just having a discussion about these really interesting issues in policing. If you agree, let us know, but almost more importantly, if you disagree. And definitely, I can guarantee at least 2 of the cases that we're going to talk about today, we're going to have some pretty serious disagreement with. And one of the cases, I can actually argue it from both sides. So since I definitely can see that we're going to have some disagreement there. If you haven't already, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you share it with friends. That way we can get as many people as possible in here. And there's one other thing that I want to point out before we start getting into these cases, is that right behind me, you're going to see that we got our YouTube Creator Award for 100,000 subs. So I believe we're a little over 100,000, but we finally got the award from YouTube. So that was really exciting for us. So just wanted to point that out there. We do have that in the background. So let's see where everybody is coming from today. So we've got Shaquille Oatmeal, as usual, from Dallas. We've got someone from New York City. And let's see, we've got Clarksburg, West Virginia. Hi, Linda. Sergeant George, good to see you. And, Sergeant George, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. Sergeant George is one of our absolute favorite followers and commenters, and definitely appreciate you being in here, sir. Hopefully you have a great birthday. And we got Barella from Colorado. Barella, where are you from in Colorado? The wedding I was at a couple weeks ago was out in Vail. Beautiful part of the country. All right, so we're going to go ahead and start getting into these cases. So the first case that we're going to talk about, and because we haven't been here for a couple weeks, there definitely have been some really important police issues that we really haven't talked about. And this first case is the Takaya Young case. So that's the one that we absolutely have to go with. And I know that there's going to be a lot of opinions on this case. And you know what? There should be a lot of different opinions on this case. So as I'm going through it, please let you know what you think about the Takaya Young officer-involved shooting. So just a reminder, this is an officer-involved shooting. This is a case that happened on August 25th, 2023 in Westerville, Ohio. It involved Takaya Young, who was a 21-year-old pregnant female. So here's what happened in this case. So in Ohio, they have something called townships, and where I'm from and where I work and where I live, we don't really have these, but it's basically something called townships. I don't know if it's like little cities, but essentially this is going to be right outside of Columbus, Ohio. And there was a police officers with the Blenheim County Township were at a Kroger store, and while they were at the Kroger store, the reason that they were initially at the Kroger store was because someone had locked their keys in the car, and police officers were doing what they should be doing in a small town or a place where people need help. Is they were just providing a community service function, helping the individual get their locked keys from their car. So police officers, they're kind of just there. They're not out jacking people up. They're not making traffic stops. They're not trying to bug anybody. Literally, they were just at the store helping someone out, trying to get their keys that had been locked in the car. So while police officers, and there's 2 officers, while the officers are there on scene, an employee from Kroger runs out and makes contact with the police officers. And here's what the employee from the Kroger said. The employee from the Kroger points to someone who later ends up being a 21-year-old female named Takaya Young. The Kroger employee points out and said, that lady right there getting into that car, she just stole some liquor. So at that point, police officers really don't, yes, Cajun Randy, this is the case, yes. So police officers at that point, again, even though they're there helping someone out with keys locked in a car, they really don't have any choice at that point. They have to go and make contact with the woman, try to detain her. So, we have to think about, well, what do police officers need to detain people initially? Well, all police officers need is reasonable suspicion. They don't need probable cause to detain. They don't need proof beyond a reasonable doubt. All police officers need is reasonable suspicion. And if you know anything about criminal justice or the law, the standard of reasonable suspicion, it's actually a pretty low standard. So, that's just in order to detain. So all police officers needed was reasonable suspicion to detain. Now, this is reasonable suspicion that a crime has been committed. And essentially that is, what would a reasonable person think? But it has to be something the police officers can articulate. So it has to be something police officers have to be able to say, I think you committed this crime for this reason. And that has to be reasonable. So that's what we're looking at. So, in this case, was there reasonable suspicion? Well, you have an employee at the store who is, representing the store and pointing. They didn't just say, hey, a woman stole, a black lady stole, a white guy stole, someone with a green hat on stole. So that isn't the case. And then police officers, drive in the area and try to find someone who matches the description. That wasn't the case here. An employee said, that person right there stole. So there is, at that point, yes, there's definitely reasonable suspicion to detain at that point. So as police officers are walking up to Miss Young, she was going to her vehicle, which was a Lexus. As she gets in the car, police officers make contact. They notice a couple things. Well, the first thing is that the vehicle doesn't have any license plates. And that's an issue we're going to get to later, because there are a lot of people who comment and said, well, police officers can just get the license plate and issue a warrant later. Well, again, maybe that's the case, and I could make that argument for a lot of different cases. That's not an argument here, because the vehicle didn't have any license plates. Also, there was no handicap sticker on the vehicle, and the car was parked in a handicap zone. So now we have to put ourselves into the mind of the police officer, because that's how all of the case law is written. So now you're a police officer, someone says that person stole. Okay, now you're a police officer, like, okay, now the person who they're saying just stole liquor is getting into a car that's in a handicap spot, which is like right up front. So they're parked up front, and the car doesn't have license plates. Well, if you were trying to commit a crime and get away with it, what kind of things would a person do? They would park up front, even if it was illegal, and they would take the license plates off the car so the store or the police officers couldn't identify who they were. So those things combined with the employee saying that person stole, that gives the police officers reasonable suspicion. One police officer walks up to the window and identifies himself as a police officer and tells her to get out of the car. He actually tells her to get out of the car. She's being detained 17 times. Now, a reasonable person in this situation would listen to the police officer. She goes back and forth with the police officer. She said, I didn't do shit. And then the police officer, she asked the police officer why she's being detained. The police officer, he tells her, he said, you're accused of shoplifting. You're being detained. You're not free to leave. Step out of the car. So the police officer at this point tells her the reason why she's being detained. There's absolutely no doubt there's reasonable suspicion to detain her at this point. And this is when the officer is talking to her right at her window. It was at that point that a second police officer comes from behind the car and then walks to the front of the car. Now, this is where most of the issues we're going to have with this case, that I think most people are going to have with this case, is when that second police officer walks in front of the car. And yeah, we are absolutely going to get to it here in a second. So a police officer steps in front of the car and also starts giving commands to get out of the car. It was at that point that she puts the car in drive and starts moving forward. Now, because the police officer is in front of the car, as she's moving forward, she is basically trying to run into the police officer. We could say she's not trying to run into the police officer, but there's a really easy way to test that. If someone is in front of you and you move forward, you're trying to run into them. If someone is standing in front of you and you don't move the car forward, well, I could say you're not trying to run into them. So it was at that point that as the car goes forward, actually the tires squeal. So if you watch the video, the tires actually squeal. It's really easy to say in the comfort of your own home in 2020 hindsight, well, the vehicle wasn't moving very fast. Well, we know that now, because we're sitting in our office or our home or in our nice studio. But the officer who was there, he didn't know that. And as soon as she hit the gas, the tires started to squeal. So when you hear squealing tires, to me and to any reasonable person, that would be evidence of trying to make the car go fast. So she does, as she accelerates forward, the police officer kind of starts to step out of the way, and he fires one shot through the windshield. It hits Miss Young, and she does die from her injuries. Okay, now let's talk about exactly what the police officer was doing. And I just got to say it just right out of the way. It's only fair and honest to say, so I'm going to say it. The police officer should not have stood in front of the car. And, when I say these things, I don't just say them, and this is when I criticize police officers, and this is why when other people criticize police officers, I hold myself to the same standard. When you criticize what a police officer does, you can't just say, well, that officer is racist, or there's systematic racism, or he's a white guy. Like that's bullshit. That's ridiculous criticism. You have to say what you should say. What I'm requesting, because what I do of myself is that when you criticize a police officer, you say, this is the exact thing that the police officer shouldn't do. It wasn't reasonable. And then cite to training, policy, or law and say they shouldn't have done this. This is why. Here's what they should have done instead. That is an honest criticism of police, which is where I really think that we should be if we're going to have honest and reasonable discussions. So where I can say with this, there is no training anywhere available where a police officer is supposed to stand in front of a car that may be moving. That's ridiculous. There's absolutely no training for that. So essentially, it's a violation of training. It goes against training. It goes against common sense. The officer shouldn't have done it. Now, I hope we can all get on the same page there, right? But that's an important thing. Now, just because the police officer, so here's where I'm going with this, though. So that's what the police officer did. Let's call it a bad act. So the bad act of the police officer is he made a tactical mistake. He made a tactical error. Well, what's the punishment for a tactical error? Well, the punishment is the officer goes to more training. Maybe he spends a couple days at the range. Maybe he sits through a lecture. Maybe he reads through the standard operating procedures that say don't to do that. So the punishment that we've decided for a police officer who makes a tactical error in the moment is to get more training. Like I think that's literally what it is. Now, what did Miss Young do? Well, first she drove to the store with no license plates. She parked in a handicapped spot, and then she stole alcohol. So all three of those things, right off the bat, are worse than a tactical error because all three of those things are crimes. Then what did she do? She made contact with the first police officer who was reasonable, who didn't stand in front of her car, who gave her 17 orders and commands that were lawful to get out of the car. She didn't listen. After she didn't listen to the police officer, when there was another human being standing in front of her, she drove forward trying to run that police officer over. Either trying to run that police officer over or just not giving a shit if she ran that police officer over. So what that is a violent felony. If you're driving your car towards another person, that's a violent felony. So what I'm saying is that a tactical error is not equivalent to a violent felony, either legally or morally. So yes, the police officer committed a tactical error. She committed a violent felony. Those two things are absolutely not equivalent. Also, I should point out that she was pregnant at the time. So she was carrying a child, she was pregnant. People are making a big deal about this. And well, one, because she was sitting down in the car, there was no way for a police officer to know that she was pregnant. But you know who did know she was pregnant? Miss Young. Miss Young decided to shoplift, steal alcohol. And first, let me just say this. What kind of a pregnant person steals alcohol? This is absolutely insane and ridiculous. So she knows she's pregnant. Knowing that she's pregnant, she's going to shoplift alcohol, not listen to police officers, and then be so comfortable with defying police officers that she's going to try to run a police officer over. I'm going to tell you this as well. At 21 years old, she had also been arrested for and charged with fleeing police officer and shoplifting. So in the past, she had shoplifted, gotten caught, and she had also had another charge for fleeing a police officer. So this isn't new stuff for her. The grandmother, Takaya Young's grandmother, who's been on the news talking about her, the grandmother actually had a restraining order against Takaya Young. 3 days before this happened, Takaya Young allegedly went over to grandmother's house, caused a disturbance. Takaya Young's grandmother called police officers and got a restraining order against her. So again, this is the kind of person that we're dealing with here. It isn't some nice, innocent person who's 21, never committed any kind of a crime. So those are my thoughts on this case. Now when it comes to the police officer being charged, here's what I think. Is that, again, a tactical error isn't equivalent to isn't equivalent to a violent felony, even though I agree the police officer should not have stood in front of the car. I agree. Everyone who's going to say that, I'm going to agree with you 100% on that. There's absolutely no doubt. Do I think that the police officer will get charged? I think it's possible and likely that the police officer might get charged. But again, in order to charge a police officer, all you need is probable cause. And again, probable cause is higher than reasonable suspicion, but it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. So my guess is that the police officer is going to get charged. And then at the end of it, I don't think he'll be convicted. And I don't think the police officer should be convicted, because beyond a reasonable doubt, you would have to show that the police officer was in no danger. If you could show that there was a likelihood, or that in the police officer's mind, that it was reasonable that he was going to face death or great bodily injury, if that belief inside the police officer's mind was reasonable, that's the standard. That's when police officers can utilize deadly force. And again, you're standing in front of a car, someone is trying to move the car forward, the tires squeal, and all of this happens in less than a second. So is it reasonable in that moment that he thought that there was a risk of death or great bodily injury? And I know someone asked a few minutes ago, well, how is shooting her going to stop the car? That's actually a really good question. Well, here's why. So if the car is moving forward, the tires squeal, in that moment, how long would it take for her to press down on the gas pedal and just completely run you over so the police officers then Lexus meet? How quick would that take? That would be really, really quick. Less than a second, a fourth of a second, third of a second. It would be absolutely quick for them to do. So the police officer in the moment thinking, I have to do anything possible in less than a split second to make sure she doesn't punch down on the gas, otherwise I'm dead. Is that a reasonable thought that might go through a police officer's head? Yes, absolutely. If someone is willing to run their car into you without giving a shit about you, is it that much of a leap to think that they're going to accelerate a little bit faster and kill you? No, that's not a leap. And in the news and in the media, obviously the mainstream media is, pretty much given and fed information by anti-police activists. What they keep saying is that she was a 21-year-old pregnant female who was unarmed. That is not correct. Unarmed, if you have a vehicle and you're driving a vehicle towards someone, that is armed. The idea that is in the category as unarmed is dishonest at best. Let's see what all of you think, because I'm really curious about this case. All right, so let's see what we got here. Shaquille says, I wish people would just comply. Imagine that, Shaquille Oatmeal, because here's the thing. If she would have gotten out of the car and I'm not saying you have to talk to police officers. I have a law degree. I'm not saying you have to talk to police officers or give them any information. But if you step out of the car and just cooperate with police officers, give them your ID, she'd probably get a ticket. Like, that's what it is. So she was willing to try to, put a police officer's life in danger, another human's life in danger, over a ticket, over a citation. Like, that's the kind of person we're dealing with here. Her not getting a citation was more important than someone else's life, and it's really important to remember that's who Takaya Young was. So yeah, I mean, this would have been a ticket. She would have complied. She would have got a ticket. She would have been on her way. Maybe not on her way in that car, because the car didn't have license plates, so the cops may have towed that car or made her get a different ride home. Also, Barella says, a vehicle is a deadly weapon. Absolutely. Dad's son asks, did the cop say her tires peeled out? Really good question, Dad's son. So the police officer has not made a public statement. His attorney or representatives have not made a public statement. But if you watch the video, you can listen. The tires peel out. You could hear the tires screech. So he didn't say that. Again, Dad's son, because he hasn't made a public statement yet. But just by watching, you can clearly see that the tires, you can hear it. Let's see. Enk says, of course she shouldn't comply, but the world is a crazy place. I think he said she should comply. Cajun Randy says, so why did the cop put himself in danger over a ticket? I don't know, Cajun Randy. So if I was the internal investigator, and I've been an internal investigator, Cajun Randy, if I was an internal investigator for that police department, that would be one of the very first questions I ask. Why did you stand in front of the car? So I can only guess, Cajun Randy, of why. And again, I'm going to say it for the 10th time, that he shouldn't have done that. It was a tactical error. And sometimes when human beings are put in stressful situations, and your body gets a bunch of adrenaline, that human beings don't always perform great under stress. It's just one of those things that it isn't just for police officers, it's for anybody. Think of someone in your personal life that was in a stressful situation and, see how they perform in that situation. Are they going to do everything perfectly? No, of course not. So that's probably what happened here. Also, and this is also me guessing, maybe the police officer thought, this person is gonna get a ticket. Is she really going to try to kill me over a ticket? Probably not, because most reasonable, normal, most decent humans aren't going to try to kill someone over a ticket. So again, the police officer made a mistake, a tactical error. On a scale from 1 to 10, that's probably like a 2 or a 3. Trying to run someone over and kill another human, yeah, that's like a fucking 10 out of 10. Like, there is no comparison here between those. Peace Love says, why do internal affairs fail miserably at holding police accountable? Yeah, that makes no sense. That's absolutely. So Peace, Love, and Liberty, you're making that comment based on no information, no knowledge, no education or training or experience when it comes to police or law. So if you ask a better question, I'll answer it. That's a really silly question. Let's see. Army with Armory says, stressful situations. Let's have empathy for the victim. What a tool this guy is. Well, to me, the victim is the police officer. There are multiple victims in this case. When you try to kill someone and that person uses self-defense, I can tell you who I think the victim is. Let's see. Any other questions? Cajun says the problem is I don't believe it was a tactical error. Well, you can believe that, Cajun Randy. I don't know. I mean, again, would you hang on? So you said you don't believe it was a tactical error. Well, it was. It was a tactical error because he shouldn't have done it, because we have tactics and training, and if you do something against that, we call that a tactical error. Now, if you're saying that there's something more devious there, then great. But we don't have any information on that. So all I can do is guess that he thought, and this is just me guessing, he thought, why would someone be such a shitty person that they would try to kill me over a citation? So I could see a police officer having that thought. But again, we see what kind of person Takaya Young was, because she did try to kill someone over a traffic citation. Let's see, any other comments here? Army says, yeah, you're right. I don't know her story. I can only point to the criminal cases that she's had filed against her at 21 years old, and the fact that her grandmother had called police and tried to get a restraining order against her. And I can see what she did on video trying to kill a police officer. You're right. I don't know anything else about that. Kate Duran says, I believe it was a deliberate setup to excuse to shoot, and I think she thought he would move aside. I disagree, Cajun Randy. Again, I don't think so. So really quick, Cajun Randy. So this officer, again, he's probably going to be prosecuted. So I'm just like, again, let's put ourselves in the mind of the police officer. What police officer in 2023 says to themselves, you know what I'm going to do? Shit, I'm about halfway to a retirement, but you know what would be a really good idea today? I'm going to purposely, intentionally, and plan out a situation where I can put myself in front of put myself in a situation where I'm going to shoot a young black female over what is really a citation, because that would not only be good for my career, that would be good for my pension, for my family. That's just really a good idea. So again, if you think that's what police officers are thinking, you've never talked to a police officer before, or you haven't talked to a police officer since you were watching NYPD Blue in the 90s, because that is not at all how police officers are thinking. In fact, they're trying to do the exact opposite. That's what you believe. Well, that's insane. Yeah, so let's see. DT says she was a bad person. She tried to harm someone, and she got what she asked for. She chose violence, and she was met with violence. Yeah, that's the thing. So my goal, as I've said this, and I haven't said this yet today, but my goal in all this is I want less violence between police officers and citizens. If police officers make a mistake, I'm going to call it out. Like in this case, the officer made a tactical error. We should not have tactical errors from police officers, so we need to train them better. In order to train police officers better, we absolutely need more funding for police officers. So this kind of stuff, more funding, more training, so this kind of stuff doesn't happen. That's the goal. Less violence between police officers and citizens. And that has to come from police on the training side, and also that has to come from people. Because here's the thing. If you don't attack a police officer, if you don't try to kill a police officer, it's virtually impossible to get harmed or injured by a police officer. Yes, there are outlier cases, and I can point to those cases, but in general, like in this case, again, I don't think anyone's arguing that if Takaya Young had stepped out of the car, she would have gotten a citation and her car might have been towed and she would have gone home safe and had her baby. See, the thing is, that's the outcome that I want. I want the police officers to go home safe. I want citizens to go home safe. I want young females who are 21 years old not to get shot and killed by the police. That's what I want. But to say that it's all the fault of the police is absolutely ridiculous, and it's not going to do anything to solve the problem, because I think we should solve this problem. Part of it is say, hey, do not try to run police officers over, and all of this is avoided, because I want this to be avoided. Okay, a couple more comments. Cajun Randy says he had time to step aside. Again, saying the officer had time to step aside, that's really easy to say from the comfort of your own home. That's a luxury, and you know what? Enjoy that luxury. Let's see. One more comment. Last comment says, Barella says, there was a similar case here in Colorado. Yeah, there's been other similar cases where this happened. The police officers have not been found guilty. Cajun Randy, Tyree Nichols, Elijah McClain, Tony Timpa. Yeah, I've talked about all of those cases. And yes, there are 250 million citizen police contacts a year. A small percentage of them are bad. The ones that are bad, I will absolutely say and agree with you, those are bad police contacts. We need to do better. If police officers commit a crime, I will say to you, police officers need to commit a crime. So again, even if we named 1,000 cases right now, 1,000 cases out of 250 million contacts, that still means that 99.99999999% of the time, police officers do the right thing. So yeah, it's rare, but when police officers do commit a crime, they absolutely do need to be held accountable. I have no question with that. Every case that you just mentioned there, I have condemned those police officers, Tyree Nichols, Elijah McClain, even though that was more of the medics than police officers, though I don't think there was reasonable suspicion to stop Elijah McClain, and Tony Timpa. Police officers messed up on all of those cases. I cover those cases all of the time. Okay, the next case that we're going to talk about, in this last week, it's more of a recent one. In the last week, we've had 2 police officers who've died in the line of duty. It's been pretty tragic. It's been a pretty bad week for that. So the first one I'm going to talk about is on September 16th. LA County Sheriff's Deputy Ryan Klinkenbroomer. He was 30 years old. He was hired in 2018. He was a field training officer, and he just got engaged 4 days before this. So he wasn't on a call for service. He wasn't on a traffic stop. He wasn't stopping people. He was driving. That's all he was doing. He had just left the substation. As he left the substation, he pulled up to a red light, and a car pulled up next to him, and the driver of the vehicle just started shooting in his car. He didn't have any time to respond. He didn't have any chance. And this is the fear with police officers. I can say that my wife has told me that when I was working on the street, that this is what she feared. And I think a lot of police families fear, like, this is what you fear more than anything. Like, if I'm on a traffic stop, if a police officer's on a traffic stop, they know, okay, I've trained for this. Like, I've trained for this. I know what the dangers are. If someone tries to attack a police officer on a traffic stop, at least they're going to have some chance. Now, the bad guys might win sometimes, but the police officers are always going to have some chance because they trained for this. If police officers are on a domestic violence call, yeah, those go bad. Those are really dangerous for cops. But police officers trained for that. There's usually 2 of them there. And again, if someone tries to attack a police officer, at least they have a chance. When it's a situation like this, when you're in your car, stopping at a red light, and someone comes up and starts shooting, there's no chance. This is an absolute true ambush. This is a cowardly, awful, disgusting ambush. This could happen to any police officer. There's no chance. We all know it, and it's absolutely tragic. 2 days after this happened, this is an assassination of a good man. And 2 days after this happened, police officers were able to locate the offender. His name is the suspect is Kevin Catanio Salazar. They were able to find him in his home. So they were actually able to find the car parked outside of the residence. They set up with SWAT around the home. They tried to get him out. It's a huge SWAT scene. Didn't come out. They threw in chemical munitions. After several hours, he came out peacefully, meaning he didn't come out with a gun, with a knife. He didn't attack police officers. So let me just say this real quick. So even though this guy just killed a cop and he walked out of the house, police officers used zero force. Zero force. There was no takedown. There was no taser. There was no beanbag. There was no 40 millimeter. There was no shooting. So even though this guy just killed a cop, listen, there's no one that cops hate more than someone who just killed a cop. Police officers utilized zero force. And the reason that they utilized zero force is because he didn't try to harm any police officers. So kind of go with the Takaya Young case. Like, if you try to run police officers over, you're probably going to get shot. if you come out even if you're a vile piece of shit, if you come out peacefully, police officers aren't going to use any force, and in this case, they didn't. They got him into custody. So hopefully he spends the rest of his short life in prison. He never gets out again. That was an absolutely terrible case. The other case, and this one is just as disgusting. This happened on August 14th, but the video of it just came out recently. August 14th of this year in Las Vegas, there was a retired police chief. His name is Andreas Probst. He was riding on a bicycle in Las Vegas, Nevada. This is something that he did, to stay active. He did it. I think he's around 70 years old. As he was riding his bicycle early in the morning, he was in a bike lane. There were two young individuals. One was 16, one was 17. And the reason why I'm saying all this, and I'm pretty confident what I'm saying, is because they fucking filmed themselves doing it. So not real smart. They filmed themselves doing all of this on cell phone, and they actually uploaded it to social media. So again, this isn't me guessing. This is absolutely what happened. As they were filming themselves driving around in a stolen car, hey, that's classy. As they're driving around in a stolen car, they see Mr. Probst. He's riding a bicycle. It's early in the morning, but it's light outside. As he was riding his bicycle, one of them said to the other, "Are you ready?" And the other one said, "Yeah," hit his ass. As they drove, they didn't know this guy. They didn't know he was a retired police chief. All they saw was a guy on a bicycle. They probably didn't even know how old he was. And that's the thing. They didn't care. They have no respect or they don't care at all about other people's lives. It's disgusting behavior. What they did is they drove up their vehicle right behind the bicycle and they hit him. He went over the hood of the car. He was laying on the ground, and they drove away laughing at this. This is absolutely disgusting behavior. Listen, for 16 and 17-year-olds, disgusting behavior like this is learned, and we all have to work to kill the messenger of this kind of behavior. He was laying on the ground. The reason that anyone found him is because his cell phone gave some kind of an alert that he was in danger or that his cell phone fell. So that alert actually went to his daughter, who went to the scene, and she found him there on the ground. He did die of his injuries. They were able to locate the two individuals, Jesus Ayala, 17 years old, and Jazimir Keys is a 16-year-old. They've both been arrested, and they've been charged as adults. Hopefully they spend the rest of their lives in jail. One thing that's a little bit interesting is both of their mothers have been giving press conferences on this case, and it's basically a competition with the mothers saying how shitty the other son is. So it's basically the mothers having a competition about who has the worst son. That's what it's been like in the media. Sergeant George, condolences to the family of the retired police chief. Yeah, that's absolutely terrible. Terrible case. The last case that I'm going to talk about, and this is another controversial one. I feel pretty strongly about this one, like I do with the Takaya Young case. Only on the Takaya Young case, again, I can make an argument that, okay, I could see where the police officer made a mistake. I kind of see the police officer being charged. I get it. It's in the realm of possibility. I can conceptually understand the police officer in the Takaya Young case being charged. Don't think he should be convicted, but I get that he'll be charged. I understand that. This case is been all over the news the last couple days. The guy involved, his name is Johnny Mims. He's been on a media tour, and I'm going to get into it. This is basically the band director from hell. So this was a couple days ago over in Birmingham, Alabama. The individual's name is Johnny Mims. So here's what happened. So here's what you're going to hear if you read the headline from PBS, which is absolutely ridiculous. The PBS is going to say the headline of band director was tased and brutalized by police officers because he didn't stop his band from playing music at a high school football game. Well, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely not what happened, but I'm going to tell you what happened. So here's what happened in this case: is there were two different teams and schools that were playing a football game. After the football game ended, the school administration at the high school wanted people to leave. Now, is that reasonable? Well, it's reasonable. At some point, the high school has to close. Really, you have all these young people there. The longer that young people after a football game are hanging out at a school, the more likely there is for an incident. And again, there's staff there. The school has to close. The stadium has to close at some time. So what they did is the school administration asked the police officers, "Hey, we got to get these people out." So police officers, go around and contact people. "Hey guys, it's time to leave. Let's go." This really happens in this area every single football game. It's nothing new. Well, for some reason, after the football game was over, the two bands, the home team band and then the away team band, started playing. Well, playing, long after the game has ended, all that did is encourage people people to stay. Well, that's against what the school wanted and, really against what the police officers were trying to do because the police officers were trying to get people out of the stadium. So what the police officers did is they went over to the home team band. They contacted the band director and they said, hey, we're actually trying to wrap this up and get everyone out of here. Can you guys please stop? And you know what that band director said? The band director said, okay. And they stopped playing. And that was it. There was no use of force. There was no arrest. Because here's the thing. When you cooperate and when you act like a decent human with police officers, 99.999% of the time, nothing's going to happen. So we shouldn't be shocked there that the police officers asked the band director to stop playing. Band director stopped. Nothing happened, right? This is no story. However, we get to Johnny Mims. Johnny Mims, he was the band director. He was the band director of the away team. So police officers did the same thing. They all went over to Ms. Johnny Mims and they said, hey, we're trying to wrap this up. The high school's closing. We need you to stop playing. So Johnny Mims, instead of listening to the police officers, he absolutely did not. He told the police officers, and I quote, get out of my face 7 different times. The police officers were saying hey, you need to stop. You have to stop playing. But again, he said 7 different times, get out of my face. So again, the exact opposite of what the first band director did. So, and here's the thing. In a situation like this, Johnny Mims, he didn't know if there was an emergency. He didn't know if an ambulance was trying to get through, if there was some other reason that the high school had to close. He didn't know if there was some traffic issue or something. He didn't know if there was some other reason that the police officers were asking him to stop. He didn't know and he didn't care. This was his chance to defy police officers. And because when you have not much going on in your life, things like this where you could defy police officers, it's a fucking gold mine to have 15 minutes of fame like this. So what happened is he told the police officer he wasn't. So police officers said multiple times. This goes on over several minutes. It's not like it's quick. So listen, it's not like they just went up to him. He's directing the band and they went and tased him. Like that's what the headlines make it seem. No, this is arrogance of him egging his students on to keep playing, even though the police officers were asking him not to. This is like the little bit of power that Johnny Mims has, and he was gonna fucking exercise it. It's actually really, really pathetic for an adult male to act like this. And I should say that the students were actually pretty good staying in tune, even though this was probably a stressful situation for them. So eventually, after several minutes, the police officer told Johnny Mims, hey, if you don't stop, you're gonna be arrested. We're gonna take you to jail for this. So a lot of the times when police officers say you're gonna go to jail, you're gonna be arrested, most reasonable people think, well, shit, I don't want to go to jail, so I'm just gonna comply. I'm gonna stop doing this. That's not what Johnny Mims said. Johnny Mims, he said, that's cool, and he gave police officers a thumbs up. And here's where the grift comes in. And this is really, really important. So he told police officers, he didn't say, oh my God, you can't arrest me. I'm not going to go to jail. I'm going to fight this. No, he made it seem like he was going to cooperate because he said, that's cool, and gave a thumbs up. Then police officers went to arrest him, and he immediately started to resist arrest. Not only did he resist arrest, but he tried to strike a police officer. At that point that he tried to hit a police officers utilized a taser, which was absolutely appropriate to do. So here's the thing. When you resist a lawful arrest and you try to swing at a police officer, there's a chance that police officers might use force. There's a possibility that use of force might be a taser. And listen, I don't care if you're the director of the Chicago fucking Symphony. If you act like this, you're going to have force used on you against a police officer. So I don't think the cops did anything wrong in this case. I'm really curious to see what your opinions are. Yeah, you just have to ask yourself, what would Bach do? What would he do? Would he be an asshole like Johnny Mims? All right, so here we go. Shaquille O'Neal says he's supposed to be a role model. That night he wasn't. Yeah, he absolutely isn't a role model. So let's, Shaquille O'Neal, thank you for saying this. So now think about this. Now you have someone who's supposed to be a role model for kids during an interaction with a police officer. You have 100 different people watching, kids, high schoolers watching this interaction, and he's defying police again for no reason. There was a lawful command from police officers to stop. Not only is he not listening to the police officers, he's not being reasonable, and then he's resisting arrest when the police officer, and again, he knew he was going to be arrested because the police officer said, if you don't stop, we're going to arrest you. He said, that's cool. So what does that do to the 130 kids who are watching this? What they're thinking is, yeah, that's how you're supposed to act. This is how reasonable role model adults are supposed to act with police officers. And like I said before, the more that you run from, resist arrest, attack police officers. The more you do those things, the more likely police shootings are. A guy like me sitting here in the studio, my goal is less police shootings. I want less police shootings, so I want our leaders, our teachers, our police officers, our firefighters, I want them to be reasonable, and I want them to teach young kids, hey, here's how you interact with police officers. You do not run, you do not fight, because statistically, if we're going to trust the science, statistically, when you do those things, the chances that you're going to be harmed by a police officer increase exponentially. And shouldn't we all want the chances of people being injured by police officers to decrease? I want them to decrease. So encouraging young kids, setting the example for young kids to take actions that the only possible outcome is that there's more of a chance they're going to be harmed by police officers. What kind of a psychopath would want to set that example for young kids? It's absolutely insane. I don't see how a teacher does that. So again, either he knows this, Johnny Mims, and he doesn't care, or, again, this is his chance for 15 minutes of fame, and he's going to fucking cash in and hit a home run. All right, let's see what else you guys say. Slim says, could there be another way for police to handle this? Slim, I'm not sure. Maybe. I guess they could just walk away, and they could go and tell the school, hey, he's refusing to stop. I know you're trying to get everyone out of here. There's safety concerns. The lights are going to be going off here in a few minutes. It could cause a situation where there's panic and it's not safe, but this guy's not stopping. He's not being reasonable. What should we do? Yeah, there's a lot of things that police officers can do, but in this case, they tried to talk to him and reason with him for several minutes, and they gave him consequences, and he didn't care. Officer Blue Gun, good to see you, sir. The public needs retraining, not the police. I'm always good for police getting more training, but in this situation, they did nothing wrong. Let's see. Police Love says, learn your rights. The police don't know them. Okay, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. That's a nonsense comment. Let's see. Cajun says, how come when cops use force illegally on citizens, they don't expect force used on them and never have it? Cajun Randy, yeah, I mean, that comment doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So Cajun Randy, and I know that you know this and you're kind of trolling, but that's okay. So the question is that, when police, so who decides if police officers, so Cajun Randy, hopefully you can answer this honestly. So who decides if the use of force from police officers is within the law? Who decides? It's a judge. A judge decides that, okay? So a person on the street who is, drunk, high, or committing a crime, or who knows what, are they in a position to determine whether or not a police officer is using unlawful force or if there's reason to arrest? No. That's why you don't fight with cops on the street. That's why you comply, and if a cop does a lawful arrest, you should absolutely sue that police officer and file a complaint. You absolutely should. That's what you need to do. And a judge is the one who decides. Should be the citizen decide. So Cajun Randy, what you're saying, so someone who just beat their wife or just killed their best friend, a police officer comes to arrest them, and because they don't feel like they want to go to jail, they should be able to fight and kill police officers. So if that's what you're arguing for, Cajun Randy, okay, great. That doesn't make any sense. Let's see. Another comment. Army says they asked him to stop the band. When the cops asked, they are violating your rights. No, that's not correct. That's not correct. It was totally reasonable to do. Officer Blue Gun, thank you for that comment. That's the crazy in the comment today. Peace, love, and liberty is the crazy person in the comment today. So always have one crazy person. And the thing is, Officer Blue Gun came in and knew that we were going to have one crazy person. So thank you for that comment. Cajun Randy says citizen oversight and juries decide. Exactly, Cajun Randy. That's my point. Is that when you're on the street and a police officer is telling you to do something, just comply. Don't fight back. If the cop fucks up and does something wrong, we have a whole system for that. And I'm telling you, use that system. Sue a police officer who does something wrong, because I do not want police officers to violate people's rights. I absolutely don't. I want police officers to be held accountable. But the way you hold police officers accountable, we have a system for that. We have a venue for that, a vehicle for that. We do it in court. We do it through internal affairs. Okay? Let's see. Any other comments on this case? Don't think so. So those are going to be the cases that we talk about today. I really want to thank everyone for being in here, and I appreciate all the comments. For the people who are trolling in the comments, that's fine. It's the internet. We expect it. But let me tell you about criticism. And here's the criticism that I take seriously. And Officer Blue Gun, Sergeant George, tell me if you disagree. I criticize cops all the time. In fact, in the Takaya Young case, I criticize the cops. Thank you, Shaquille O'Neal. I criticize the cops because I think the cop made a tactical error. But when I criticize police officers, I say, this is what the police officer did. This is what's wrong. And I say, hey, listen, here's why it's wrong. And I point to training, policy, or case law. And I said, here's my evidence of why the police officer should do something different. A lot of the comments from Police Love and Liberty, they're not citing to training, evidence, law. It's just general comments. So when you just make general comments like police are systematically racist, again, it's not serious criticism. And if you're not going to be a serious person, then you're not going to get a serious reaction out of me. I think that's a pretty reasonable way to handle it. Again, thank you so much for being here. My name is Daniel. You can go ahead and follow me everywhere over at Police Law News. And more importantly, please make sure you follow Cop Watch TV, subscribe, share it with all of your friends. And again, we're really happy about getting this YouTube award for 100,000 subscribers. So I hope everyone has a great weekend. Be safe, and we will see you next week.